Hello again. Let's get some further reaction then to events last night at the UN. The US vetoed a Security Council demand for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, while Britain abstained. Today, there have been reports of fierce fighting in the city of Khan Yunis, and Israel claims it's now killed 7,000 Palestinian militants since October the 7th. Well, joining me now is Mark Regev, the senior advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu and former Israeli ambassador to the UK as well. Good to see you again, Mr. Regev. Your reaction to last night's vote?
Well, we thank the United States for its veto. Very important. The United Nations, unfortunately, has a built-in anti-Israel majority. And we thank President Biden for the diplomatic support. Without that, a very bad resolution would have been passed.
13 of the 15 Security Council members, though, did vote for a ceasefire. It was co-sponsored by nearly 100 other countries. This wasn't a victory for Israel, was it?
Well, I'll explain why they're wrong. They're wrong because a ceasefire means a ceasefire with Hamas. That's like a ceasefire with Al-Qaeda or a ceasefire with ISIS. It's unsustainable. And if Hamas stays in power in Gaza, you're just going to have another October 7th massacre sometime in the next 6 months or in the next year. And we'll have another war in Gaza and more bloodshed. It's a recipe for more of the same. If you get rid of Hamas, as we will do, then you have an opportunity for a better future.
Israel has said that there'll be no ceasefire for the moment, but you know, as well as I know, the pressure is on from the United States. Antony Blinken says there does remain a gap between the intent to protect civilians and the actual results that we're seeing on the ground. Put simply, too many civilians in Gaza are dying.
No, I agree with that. There is a gap. We have our goal is to limit as much as possible civilian casualties. We don't want to see Gazan civilians caught up in the crossfire. But unfortunately, that's proven very, very difficult because Hamas has adopted a strategy that deliberately endangers civilians. So while we've urged civilians to leave areas of combat, Hamas orders them to stay, sometimes at gunpoint.
So places that aren't areas of combat include Rafah and Mawazi. Rafah has seen bombing in the last 24 hours.
We'll attack Hamas where Hamas is. And that's part of the problem, because Hamas embeds itself under civilian infrastructure, under urban areas, under hospitals, under schools, under mosques. The evidence is clear. Where our soldiers every day are uncovering missiles in humanitarian institutions, terror tunnels coming out of schools. Very, very difficult things. But we are nevertheless going house to house, taking on Hamas. We will win this.
But do you see how confusing that is, Mr. Regev? On the one hand, you're saying that there are safe places in Gaza, but on the other hand, you say you still have the right to bomb those safe places if Hamas are there.
No, you have to make a distinction. You talked about Rafah specifically, but we have designated safe areas, a number of them. The maps have been shared with the Americans, the United Nations and others, and we urge Palestinian civilians to relocate to those safer areas. We've specifically picked areas where there isn't a known Hamas infrastructure, and we don't expect there to be fighting.
Why are charities and aid organisations telling us that there are no safe places to go to in Gaza?
So we simply don't accept that, and I think that's part of what Hamas wants you to believe. Because Hamas wants pressure on a ceasefire, because that's the only way they get a ceasefire is by international pressure on Israel. So they want to say there's no humanitarian aid, there's no safe place, and that everyone who's being killed is an innocent civilian. That's the Hamas talking points.
Well, it's not just Hamas, is it? Jason Lee from Save the Children, he's the country director, speaking to me a little bit earlier in Gaza, said this. Just have a listen.
There is no such thing as a safe space in Gaza right now. There is nowhere that is safe. The locations that the Israeli security forces are asking civilians to move to cannot accommodate them, not just in space, but there's absolutely no critical infrastructure there to keep them alive. There is not enough water and sanitation. There are no toilets. There's no access to food, no access to water, no access to healthcare. Civilians that move there will not have the necessary access to basic life-saving assistance to sustain life. And children would not be kept safe.
And Mark Regev, that's not a Hamas spokesman speaking. That is Jason Lee from Save the Children saying there is nowhere safe in Gaza. And even if people did move to where you say is safe, there's no facilities for them.
He didn't say that. If you listen carefully, he actually said the designated safe areas that Israel has located, he said there wasn't the humanitarian structure there, the facilities to receive the people. He did not say they were not safe, because that would be incorrect.
He did. He started that clip by saying there is nowhere safe in Gaza.
He said, but no, he said they're troubled from his perspective with the safe areas that have been allocated. And I listened very carefully. He said that the trouble is there aren't the humanitarian facilities there to absorb the people. And here we understand that that's an issue. Okay. We gave already a week ago the details, the geographic details of the safe areas to the UN, to the humanitarian organizations. And we were told indirectly from them that they can't establish their tents and other humanitarian facilities to help receive internally displaced people, because that would be seen as facilitating Israeli, the Israeli assault.
So many of the deaths that are happening amongst children and innocent civilians are down to the UN aid agencies.
No, all I'm saying is that in the designated safer areas, it's important that the UN agencies and the others establish their humanitarian presence. That they haven't done so up till now is a problem. I urge them, that's their job, their humanitarian organizations. Okay. Please do everything you can to support people of Gaza.
Understood. We're running out of time. I just want to ask you about international journalists. We've got journalists who are desperate to see for themselves in Gaza what is going on, to back up some of your claims or otherwise. Why can't they go in?
So journalists have gone in with Israel. Sky journalists have gone in with Israel.
Yeah, but that's very different, isn't it, when they go in with your forces and are told where to look and where to go?
Well, if you don't mind me saying, in the Hamas-controlled parts of Gaza, I don't think people can really speak very freely, because if they say something critical of Hamas, they face immediate violent retribution from the regime. So I think that's also very questionable.
OK, we are out of time. Let's leave it there. Mark Regev, Senior Advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, thank you.
Thanks for having me.